You are listening to Share, the podcast that's all about helping empower the wisdom. From the Wisdom for the Blind Studios in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, here's your host, Mr. Douglas Cram.
Hello and welcome to Share the Wisdom. Our guest today is Doug Ingram. Doug, how are you doing?
I'm doing just great tonight.
Good. Can you give us a brief history through high school?
Okay, I went to high school in Tallahassee, Florida. First 2 years of high school, I went to a private school. I played soccer and baseball and was just a regular run-of-the-round nut like everybody other high school kid. All my friends went to the public school, so I transferred in 11th grade to the public high school, which is the largest, oldest high school in Tallahassee, Leon High School. And I finished at Leon High School on the dean's list, and that's pretty much it for high school. I didn't play any sports at the public high school because it was a really big school, and transferring in, I hadn't been in the programs long enough to play there. And so upon graduating from high school, my prospects for college scholarships were few and far between. So I joined the United States Navy right after I graduated from high school, with the opportunity to save money for college and to use the GI Bill. And when I joined, they all thought that I should be in a technical rating, and I ended up being an operations specialist, which is basically a fancy word for a radar operator that uses the newfangled computer equipment that was out in 1977 to operate the equipment. After I graduated from A school, I was number one in my class, so I got to pick my duty assignment, and I chose out of 100 assignments that were all gray ships in the middle of the ocean, a rock in Cuba called Guantanamo Bay, and I chose that duty assignment and was there for a year working at the radar installation in Guantanamo that oversaw the Gulf of Mexico, South Florida, and all of Cuba with the radar, so that I could see the entire Western Caribbean pretty much with our radar that we had. And I worked there for a year. At the end of my duty assignment, I tried to stay because I really liked it in Cuba, but my rating was a shipboard rating, and so I was destined to go aboard ship, and left there and went to Charleston, South Carolina, aboard the USS Alwyn, FF 1081, which was a fast frigate. When I got to Charleston, no ship. They kept telling me my ship was in the Persian Gulf during the Iran hostages crisis, but it was on its way back. They were sure, and I just needed to wait for it. So I waited, and I waited about 3 months. And the duty assignment that they assigned to me while I was waiting for my ship was going to a military building that's shaped like a bunker, and I was issuing toilet paper. That was what all my training was for, so that I could have people sign for cases of toilet paper. But then finally, after 3 months, my ship came in, and they had been extended on their cruise so long that when my ship came in, everybody left the ship, and they handed me the keys and said that we'll be back in 2 weeks. But that's not quite what happened. There was a skeleton crew that stayed behind on the ship. And so basically the ship was cold iron for about 2 weeks while everybody was visiting their family and going on leave after being deployed for about 9 months during the Iran hostages. When they all came back, they told me I'd been promoted to second-class petty officer while doing nothing for the past 6 months, but I had scored so well on my exams, I made my promotion. And then the ship was sent to the Brooklyn Navy Yards. So me and the ship and everybody on it went to New York City, put the ship in the Brooklyn Navy Yards, and got their overhaul. And when we got out of the Brooklyn Navy Yards, where do they go for refresher training? Guantanamo, Cuba. I got to go right back where I started. We spent about 2 months during refresher training, making sure that all the systems worked on the ship. After that, we went on routine patrols off the Bahamas and up and down the east coast of the United States, training and doing anti-submarine missions. At that point, my 4-year enlistment was up, I got out of the service and started college. As a matter of fact, I started college 5 days before my EOS date because I was on terminal leave. So there was no break for me. I went straight from working in the Navy, and a week later, I was in classes at university here in Florida.
Yeah, I wanted to back up just a second and ask you, where were you born?
Oh, okay. So I was born in Corpus Christi, Texas, at the Naval Air Station in Corpus Christi. My dad was a naval aviator when I was born, so he was stationed in Corpus Christi at that time. I lived there for about 6 weeks, moved to Lexington Park, Maryland, where his duty assignment had moved him to. And after about 8, 9 months in Lexington Park, Maryland, I was about 10, 11 months old. We moved to Jacksonville, Florida, where my dad was from. And that was the end of his 4 years of service. And when he got out of the service, he went to work for a pharmaceutical company. Since my dad was a pharmacist, he had an in on that industry and was a pharmaceutical rep. And his territory was from Jacksonville to Pensacola. And because it was such a long drive to go all the way to Pensacola, we ended up moving halfway in between. We moved to Tallahassee, Florida when I was 2 years old. Except for my time at college and in the military, I've been here almost all my life.
Okay. I know after graduation, you went into the Navy. Did you get on board a ship before you went to Guantanamo the first time?
Yeah, when I was waiting for my school to open up, I went to Norfolk, Virginia onto a destroyer tender, and as a E1, E2, and E3 working in the deck division. So I got to learn how to paint a ship. I ruined so much of my uniforms. They issued me uniforms, and then they sent me to a ship, and then we ended up painting it and ruining all my work uniforms. I had to buy new work uniforms out of my own pocket because they told me I should not got paint all over me. But that's pretty impossible to do. After about 6 months on the destroyer tender, my school in Chicago opened up, and I transferred to the Great Lakes Naval Base, where the Operations Specialist Class A school was located at. And I spent, I think 11 weeks in Chicago learning my trade, becoming proficient on all the equipment that I was going to be using in the future. We had a class of about 60 sailors that were in the class, and I graduated in the top of the class. So that's how I got to pick Guantanamo for a year, because it was the only one that wasn't haze gray and underway.
Now, you said you liked Guantanamo. What did you like about Guantanamo?
It's in the Caribbean. How could you not like it? I got certified scuba diving in my off time. The weather was beautiful down there. The water was crystal clear, that Caribbean blue that the water is. And being a Florida boy, how could you not like living in the Caribbean? The only downside to that, unless you had orders, you weren't allowed back into the United States. But my boss was a pilot, and so we used to go on search and rescue missions when I was off, and we would fly to all points in the Caribbean: Jamaica, Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands, Aruba, Grenada, Trinidad. Anytime that there was somebody that was traveling around in an airplane or in a sailboat or a ship or a boat, and their family reported them missing or lost because they hadn't checked in, they would contact the Navy to do a search and rescue to see if we could find them. And we would volunteer to go do those just so we get to travel. So it was a really good duty assignment. I worked hard. I played hard. But again, I was 18, 19 years old when I was in Cuba. So it was a good learning experience.
I hear that the fishing is good there. Did you do any fishing?
Oh, yeah. We did snapper and grouper all over the place. We spearfished. We fished from the shore. When I got certified night diving, we would go out into the grass beds and collect lobster. Once we had about 30 lobster in the freezer, we would throw a big party and tell everybody, says, we'll bring the lobster if you'll bring the steak and the beer and the sides. And we get about 30, 40 people in, and they're like, oh, this is great, free lobster. And we're thinking, oh, this is great, free beer and free steak. So it was like a win-win for all of us.
Now, let's jump to college. You went to college here in Florida, correct?
Yes, I started at Florida State University. Then I transferred to University of South Florida in Tampa to finish out, and I graduated with a Bachelor of Science degree in economics.
Okay. And I won't say any jokes about Florida State.
That's too bad.
What kinds of work did you do after your military career and after college?
Let's see, while I was in college, I worked for a Michelin Tire Company as a mechanic and a tire, whatever you call it, tire buster, working on tires and stuff like that while I was going to college. And then when I graduated, I immediately got a job with the state of Florida. But the first job that I got with the state was working at the Division of Retirement as a retirement benefits calculation specialist. But that didn't seem like it was going to be a lifelong career. So I took another position with the Department of Banking and Finance as a financial examiner analyst. And I worked in that position for a few years as technology was booming. And it just so happened that my office was located next to the communication equipment for our mainframe computer. And so IBM was forever dropping off equipment in my office. And having the inquisitive nature that I did, I studied all the manuals that came with that equipment and started building and defending computer networks in the workplace. And then Division of Information Systems found out what I was doing, and they transferred my position to Information Systems, and I started building networks throughout the department and throughout the state of Florida.
Okay, Doug, I think we're going to take our first break here.
VA's Office of Blind Rehabilitation Services estimates there are approximately 130,000 veterans in the United States who are legally blind, and more than 1 million veterans who have low vision that causes a loss of ability to perform necessary daily activities. In this era of instant communication, where we get overwhelmed with data or facts that are useless to unsighted individuals, wouldn't it be great if we could count on news focused on real problems that impact the daily lives of veterans without sight? Introducing Wisdom for Blinded Veterans, an advanced informational portal designed by blind veterans specifically for blind and vision impaired vets that, like them, are facing challenges every day. Hi, my name is Ben, and I know the frustration. I've struggled in day-to-day tasks for over 20 years since I lost my eyesight. One of my biggest challenges has always been trying to stay up to date with the latest information of my eye disease, local news, and the ever-changing technology. I wanted to be able to have one single site that merged all the data scattered, and that's why we created Wisdom for Blinded Vets. This is a portal that can be accessed via the web, a smartphone app, telephone, email, text messaging, or Amazon's Alexa. It integrates with readers such as JAWS or Apple's VoiceOver and various other tools to give you a seamless experience. This portal will keep us updated on a variety of topics and will share knowledge that can help make our lives easier and more fulfilled. Highlights of the topics covered on the portal include podcasts, events, news, blind rehab and training, information on the BVA and other groups, a list of coordinator and bros list, online groups to interact with fellow vets facing the same challenges, and much more. Give us a try. You will not be disappointed. To learn more about us, visit our website www.w4bv.org. If you're interested in sharing your knowledge, please consider becoming a contributor by logging into our portal and going to the contributor section for more information. Wisdom for Blinded Veterans, transforming blind veterans' lives.
Okay, Doug, we're back. I see that your vision impairment was caused by Stargardt's disease. Can you explain how you went blind and what Stargardt's is?
Okay, Stargardt's is an inherited form of macular degeneration that's caused by a defect in the ABCA4 gene that wasn't discovered which gene it was until 2009. And of course, I lost my vision before then. But I found out when I was 38 years old, I had problems passing the visual part of my driver's test and went to a retina specialist, and he said that I had Stargardt's. And so I started looking it up, figuring out what it was, and continue driving for another 4 years as my vision was getting worse and worse. But then looking back at how my life was, that I've probably been having symptoms of it all my life. When I played baseball in high school, I played outfield, and when I heard the crack of the bat, I would look at the ball, I would lose the ball, shift my eye a little bit to the side, pick up the ball, catch it, and throw it in. And I just thought that that was normal because that's the only thing that I ever knew. And then when I became a radar operator, with the little blind spots that were in my retina, I had formed this scanning technique where my eyes were always moving from side to side. And that technique actually allowed me to be a better radar operator. I could pick up the context faster than most people, and it benefited from me. And I didn't even realize I was doing it because it was subconscious. And certain things about if like 20, 30 feet away, I had a hard time recognizing people's faces, but I just thought that everybody couldn't recognize the detail of somebody's face far away, that you had to be close up. I didn't know what the focal distance was because my vision wasn't blurry. It just had little spots in the middle where I couldn't see detailed stuff. And then, of course, when I got my driver's license renewed and they had me go and find out what I had, it continued to deteriorate. And by the time I was 42, I was legally blind because I couldn't be corrected past 2200. But I still had better peripheral vision than most people, so I could use my peripheral vision. But because I couldn't drive anymore and I couldn't do a lot of detail work, I ended up retiring as a computer administrator with the state because some of the detail work and independent stuff that I had to do late at night made it impossible for me to continue. So I actually didn't retire right away. I had resigned my position and was looking for another position that was more administrative and did some consulting work. But then after a few years of doing consulting work, the not being able to drive was making it hard for me to compete with other people. So I went ahead and retired and started doing property maintenance, working with people, repairing and fixing rental property and stuff like that. And I actually had some property of my own that I was renting out. And so I started managing it and other people's property and just doing that just to kind of have fun and to kind of stay out of trouble and build some income. And I ended up building a business out of it without even realizing that I was doing so. And I've been doing that for the past 20 years. I have a business partner that drives and can see, and kind of we balance each other out. I have the mechanical knowledge and he has the willingness to learn and do what I say. And it's worked. I've been doing that for 20 years now. But the Stargardt's disease is real similar to macular degeneration. And some people, they go blind as early as 8 or 9 years old. And in some people, they don't even find out that they have it until they're in their late 40s or early 50s. And so I guess I had a form that was similar to the latter, where I discovered that I had it later in life. And I'm still quite functional, even though I have a hard time seeing detailed stuff because my peripheral vision is all the vision I have. And it allows me to have spatially concepts of where stuff is at. I can see the steps in front of me so I don't fall off of things or run into things. And if you don't tell my doctor, I still drive a forklift sometimes on the properties that I do maintenance work because within 20 feet, I can see fairly well and I can move stuff around. But my doctor thinks I shouldn't be doing that.
Okay. In 2012, you went to a convention. It was called Foundation for Fighting Blindness.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about that?
After being blind for 10 years and just kind of doing my own thing, I decided, because in 2009, they had discovered what the defective gene was, and the Foundation Fighting Blindness was putting on a convention for inherited retina disease, which is what I had. And so I wanted to just learn more. So I went to this convention, never having met another person that had Stargardt's. And when I got there, there was about 60 people that were in Baltimore that had Stargardt's disease. And we were all getting around and talking about our adaptations and what our vision was. And it was almost like, me too, me too. It was kind of eye-opening. But At the same time, I was finding out that a lot of people that were blind were highly functional. They were adapting and they were overcoming their visual impairment. They were finding ways to continue to do things that they've always wanted to do. And I kind of felt like a deadbeat because I just kind of been treading water for 10 years and was quite inspired. And at that convention, I met blind veterans. I met people that were involved in the National Federation of the Blind, which is an advocacy group for the blind people. And they have a division of blind veterans. And so I started looking up and finding out where these groups were at, started meeting with them, started working with them, and started picking my game up a little bit and started being more involved, advocating for the blind, going to Washington, D.C. and talking with the congressmen and senators from Florida about issues that affect blind people and trying to get bills passed. And at some point in time, the National Association of Blind Veterans, which was the national division, I was so involved with that, they elected me to be their first vice president. And so I'm on that national board. And then the state National Federation of the Blind wanted me to be on their board too, because I was, I think, the only one in the state of Florida that was working in multiple groups with blind veterans. They wanted someone in leadership that had that veterans connection. And so I was elected to be on that board. And then here locally, I started volunteering at the Lighthouse of the Big Bend, which is a nonprofit service provider that does training for blind babies, blind children, seniors, the whole kit and caboodle. And so I was real interested in the services that they were providing and seeing if I could provide some insight or help to further assist blind people, and was asked to join their board about 4 or 5 years ago. And then last year was elected to be president of the board of that nonprofit. And that nonprofit serves the 5 counties around Tallahassee. And I'm really enjoying working with them. They're a really good agency and they provide really good service to the community, and trying to make them a more viable business and to represent them well. The CEO that's there does a really good job, and I'm really happy to be on that board. At the same time I was working on that board, some people that work for Division of Blind Services and the Florida Council for the Blind and one of the other organizations that I work with suggested that I apply for the governor to be appointed to the Florida Rehab Council for the Blind, representing blind veterans, because they had a vacant slot. They hadn't had a veteran representative in that group for several years. I was actively participating and advocating for blind people, and the people that recommended me thought that that would be a good fit for me. And so I applied, and last year was appointed by Governor DeSantis to the Rehab Council, and I've now been on that council now for about 9 months. And I'm trying to do a good job, represent the veterans, making sure that if they're not getting services from the VA and are from Blind Services, that the veteran has the right communications that are open and they're getting good service. So I get to advocate for veterans in that way by being on that council. Every quarter, we meet in a different location of the state and review the Division of Blind Services district office and the services they're providing in those areas. And some areas are doing great with veterans, and some areas aren't doing hardly anything with veterans. And so when we find that out, we start to give them information where they can serve more veterans in their area. And hopefully that's improving communication and service for veterans throughout the state.
Now, what kinds of work did you do with the NFB state affiliate board?
We do all kinds of different things. We have where we work on their people's constitutions. We also do the planning and the stuff for our state convention, where we put together where the blind people can come and learn how to advocate for themselves and for other blind people. Let's see. I'm on the communications team where we make sure that all the different groups are communicating with each other so that people know what's going on, because I think that's one of the things that happens to blind people more than other people is we feel that we lose communication because of accessibility And so to try to improve that communication between different groups and agencies is something that we work on.
Doug, what kinds of work did you do for the American Council for the Blind?
Well, I joined the local Tallahassee Council of the Blind chapter in an effort to promote communications between the ACB local chapter and the NFB, National Federation of the Blind chapter. They're kind of separate, but they kind of do the same thing. But it's somehow a point and another, the groups kind of must have competed with each other. So they're kind of separate and they won't have much to do with each other. One of the things that I do by being a member of both is try to promote harmony and communication between them. And in the past 3 years, we've done our White Cane Walk on October 15th in the downtown Tallahassee area. And we would join with the National Federation of Blind's local Tallahassee chapter and the American Council of Blind's local chapter would all get together and we would do it together. And to the point where it became so successful, now when we do our White Cane Walk, we have those two groups get together and do it together, along with the Division of Blind Services and the local Lighthouse of the Big Bend that provides services for the blind. And so it's been a big community building thing by being part of all these organizations and trying to bring them together, especially in the community for community events, so that the public can see that blind people can get out and walk the streets. They're happy people. They're regular people just like you and me. They're not anything different about them except that they have problems with their vision. And that's kind of what we're promoting. I try to do that with the state level, American Council of the Blind and the National Federation of the Blind, and actually have in other areas, because of what I've done, I've heard of other people that are doing the same thing in their communities or trying to be bridge builders instead of barriers to communications between blind people in these different groups. Their only downside is there is a policy in some of the groups that you can't serve on the board in both groups. And so since I serve on the boards in the National Federation of the Blind, I am just a participant and a member in the American Council of the Blind, but I'm still there as a bridge builder and to unify and provide good communication and camaraderie between the two groups.
Now, you mentioned your local lighthouse, I guess there in Tallahassee. How long have you been working with the lighthouse, and what kinds of things do you do for the lighthouse?
I started off just volunteering so I could find out what they did and learn who they were. Being a somewhat higher functioning blind person, I kind of taught myself how to use JAWS and Zoom text. Some of the instructors down there were having problems with the computers. The user would come in or the student would come in and say, well, my computer at home does this, this, and this. Why doesn't the computer here at the training center do that? And I would go in and show them in settings where they could change the computer to be like that. Because a lot of times the users at home don't use the default settings. They kind of customize it for their use. And being a computer guy from way back, it was easy for me to go in to the settings and show the instructors how they could customize the machine so that it'd be more set up for how their computer was at home. And then when the student left and was not using the computer anymore, I showed them where they could go and reset default settings so they could restore it after the student was there. And I did that for a while. And then we started participating and helping with their fundraisers that they do. They have a gaming expedition and competition where they have young kids that play video games that have tactile feedback on them so that they can play the games with their sighted individuals. And they have a competition and they win awards. And that was a really good fundraising and outreach event for the blind students, especially the high school age kids. And then they also do a dining in the dark where they go to the ballroom at the Florida State University and they black out all the windows. Instead of putting sleep shades on everybody, they take them in there and it is dark. Sighted people can't see them, puts them on even footing with blind people. And then they have members of the SWAT team wearing night vision goggles, comes in and brings your food and brings your tea and stuff like that. And you have to sit at the table and they won't tell you where anything is at. So you have to figure out where the rolls are, where the butter is. Try not to spill your tea all over everything. And it's a fun experience. And so even though it's only an hour long, it doesn't truly imbibe what it means to be blind. They try to have fun with it, and they use it as a fundraiser to kind of let people know that you may have a challenge for an hour during this meal, but blind people have challenges all their life. And it raises, I think last year it was around $16,000 they raised at this event, and they do it annually. So I've participated in fundraising for them. I joined the board to help move some of the planning and strategies forward. When the last president term limited out, the board elected me to represent them as president and to work with the CEO to continue on some of the strategies and programs that we had started to see them through and make sure that everything is moving forward, which it has been. Since things are going the right direction, it makes it easy for me. I can just say that they're doing a great job and stand behind them. It has been a lot of work over the past years, just setting up those strategies and programs and then seeing them through, and then watching the paid staff that works at the lighthouse come together as a team and to complete these strategies and become a better operating business.
Now, how does a blinded individual, one, find out about these various groups, and then two, how do they get involved?
Okay, the way that I found, like I said, for 10 years, I didn't know there was blindness organizations out there and advocacy groups. And I found out by going to Foundation Fighting Blindness and meeting other people that were busy in the community. Then once I kind of heard about these organizations, I started searching for them online. I knew what to search for. I knew to search for the American Council of the Blind. I knew to search for the National Federation of the Blind. And when I did a search, I'm like, oh, there's a chapter in Tallahassee. Let me call them up and find out when they're meeting. And I'm going to show up at these meetings and I'm going to see what they're all about. The thing about both of these groups that really got me is when I went to their national conventions and saw the national groups get together and saw people that had worse vision than me that were doing far more than me. It kind of put me in my place. That's how I found out about it. Word of mouth was really hard. We're trying to get the eye doctor's offices to have pamphlets and stuff like that, but they really don't want to be handing out stuff about blindness organizations in their office. They don't go out of their way to do it. A lot of times people don't even know that they're eligible for certain benefits, training, vocational and job placement from Division of Blind Services. They don't know about that. And so what we try to do is we try to find blind people and let them know that there's other blind people out there and that there are other organizations, and try to find out what their needs are and try to connect them.
I see that you're a member of the Blinded Veterans Association and the Florida Regional Group. What kinds of work do you do for the Blinded Veterans Association and the Florida Regional Group?
Well, when I first joined the Blinded Veterans Association, since I'm in the North region, which is one of the largest geographic regions, I volunteered to assist the regional director in contacting the members in that group, stay in communication with them and find out from the lists that we have what information was good and what information was bad. And then as we were starting to plan luncheons in the area, COVID hit. And so we've kind of been shut down from having lunches, and we're getting ready to start that back up again. I've been working with the American Legion here in Tallahassee for a location to have our lunches at, and I have a caterer set up. And so hopefully this fall we'll start to have our gatherings again here. And mostly I've been participating online with the Blinded Veterans Group, and recently was elected, I'm not quite sure which, to take over the treasurer duties for the FRG. But then in working with the FRG, I found about this group that used to be called OPS, which is now called Team BVA, which does adaptive sports for blind veterans. And so I thought that sounded like a really good idea. So I went to the sea kayaking out of sight clinic in Key Largo this year, and I went to the Stars Ranch in Colorado to learn how to snow ski. The people there were really nice. They were really good and helpful, providing adaptive instructions so people with limited vision or no vision could still participate in activities. And I met some other folks from the BVA around the country at these events. And there's a bunch of great people in the Blinded Veterans Association nationally. And so I'm looking forward to meeting a lot of them again and meeting new ones at the National Convention in Washington, D.C. this year in August. But I'm continuing to grow and participate and learn more about what we're doing. And I just want to help where I can.
Okay. We're going to take our second break here, Doug, so hang on.
Wisdom for the Blind is dedicated to doing everything we can for the blind and sight impaired. If you'd like to bless us with a donation to keep the website, the podcast, the webinars, and the radio station operating, we can't express how grateful we'd be. You can go to the website at w4tb.org. That's W, the number 4, tb.org, and hit the donation button. Or you can mail it to Wisdom for the Blind Incorporated. Attention donations. 1005 Marina Mile Boulevard, Suite 255, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, 33315. Wisdom for the Blind is a not-for-profit 501c3 organization. Remember, it's tax deductible. We thank you from the bottom of our hearts at Wisdom for the Blind.
Okay, Doug, we're back from our break. You wanted to talk about the various divisions within these groups. Kids division, a parent with a blind child. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about those?
The National Federation of the Blind and the American Council of the Blind, they have divisions that are broke down into specific categories. We have the parents of blind children, and then on the reverse side of that coin, we have blind parents that have children. It's a blind parents division. So they can receive assistance and they get to hang out with other blind people that have children that are blind parents. And then the people that are parents of blind children, they can share information on what it's like to raise a blind child and what kind of resources are available. And so when those groups all get together, it's like they all leave tremendously smarter because they're able to make great connections. We have divisions, like I said earlier, the National Association of Blind Veterans, which is a national division, which is a group of blind veterans that gets together, make sure that within the group there is communication among the blind veterans. And then they can share on the kind of resources that they have that are available to them. And a lot of times we get stories about, well, the VA did this and this. And they go, oh, really? I need to ask if my VA does that because that sounds like something I need. Sometimes it's just knowing what to ask for when you go to get services and to get them. That's why the communication is pretty good. Where there's also a students division where the kids actually get together and they run their own groups. They have a couple of adult mentors that kind of make sure that they stay within the bounds and scope of their division. But for the most part, they run their own divisions. Let's see, we have a deaf-blind division. So we have individuals that are both have hearing impaired and visual impairments and how they cope and learn, and they get together and meet. Then we have groups that are like more interested in diversity among blind people. We have communities of faith. So how do you grow in your faith, whatever that faith may be, as a blind person? Because a lot of times there's some challenges that other people may not have in their faith. And so we have people that meet on that. We have a seniors group that meets so they can focus on specific needs that seniors might have. And I might be missing a few because I don't have time to participate and learn about all of them because there's quite a few. But I know that if you go to the national websites for both the American Council of the Blind and the National Federation of the Blind, they have a chapters and divisions page, and then they also have it listed by state. So depending on what state you're from, you could go to the national website and you could look up your state. You could find out what's going on in your state. And for some reason, if there's nothing going on in your area and you think that there's a need, you can contact them and start one. I was pretty impressed with how many areas that these different groups are in that I knew nothing about until I started knowing what to search for on the internet and started finding out about these groups. And then it got to be a point that there was so many of them, because I probably fit into veterans, the senior, of course, having a little bit of visual impairment. I'm not visual impairment, hearing impairment. Too many shooting of guns and operating of lawnmowers and chainsaws and things like that. Put a nice little ringing in my ear. I just don't have time for all of them. But when I do have questions and focus about them, I can join those groups and see what they're doing. And then I guess the best way, start at the top, national, and then just kind of drill down to get as close to where you live as possible and find out if there's anything going on local. I still think the best way to get connected is to get connected in your local community. Find out what's going on locally. If there's nothing going on locally, a lot of these groups have what they call an at-large chapter. And so those are for people that aren't geographically located with an operating group, and they can meet on Zoom or some type of virtual event, or even just free conference call and just have a phone call and go over their agendas and what they're doing. Sometimes just a social event, a birthday party, and I hate to say it, sometimes they have these big meetings when somebody that everybody loves passes away and everybody can't travel during these COVID times. And so they'll have big Zoom meetings as a celebration of life for people that were avid proponents in the blind community and have passed away. So there's a lot of information out there once you know what to look for. National Federation of the Blind, Blinded Veterans Association, American Council of the Blind, Foundation Fighting Blindness, your local lighthouses, all great organizations, the Veterans Administration rehab centers for blind veterans. Sometimes within the school boards, they have educators that are specifically designed for being teachers of the visually impaired, finding out who they are and meeting with them and making sure that people's needs are being met. All these groups are working across the board with many of these people. And so the communications part, getting started, it might be a little awkward to get started, but once you start communicating and finding out what these groups are doing, it's great.
Now, during our break, you had mentioned that children, visually impaired children, play games. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, we have a fundraiser in town since the local Lighthouse of the Big Bend, LBB, has a gaming competition that they have. And come to find out that some of the gaming consoles that they use, the one that was shown to me was the Microsoft Xbox, that actually provides tactile information in the controller. So it vibrates. One side will vibrate, one side, it gives you feedback to what's going on if you can't fully see the picture. And then some of them, the video games, they use like 80-inch TV screens, and they're sitting in front of an 80-inch screen. It's almost like you're in the video game. And these kids have a ball. You would never know that they were blind. They are tearing it up. They have become experts on the tactile feedback from these controllers, and they think they're as good or better than anybody else. And to watch them play and see the excitement in their eyes and how much fun they're having is awesome.
Now, with the governor's appointment, did you actually meet Governor DeSantis?
No, I didn't meet him, but I do have some really cool documents with his signature and seal on them when I got the appointment. But the swearing in wasn't done by him. It was done by a notary that swore me in to uphold the duties and responsibilities of my office, that kind of stuff. It is an appointed position. I don't receive any pay, but they do cover all of my expenses when I have to travel.
During the Florida Regional Group Convention, you mentioned going to the Talking Book Library in Daytona. Can you talk about that here?
Oh, yeah. Our last Florida Rehab Council for the Blind meeting was in Daytona Beach. Our business meeting for that day was at the rehab center for the Daytona Beach area, the Florida Rehab Center that they have there. And across the street from the rehab center is the Conklin Center, which is a residency program where blind people get to learn and be fully immersed in independent living and get their skills, where they're kind of sink or swim kind of environment, but the instructors are there to guide them, but they're really good at teaching adaptive sports. Then if you go across the yard from the Conklin Center, lo and behold, there's the Talking Book Library. And so we got a big tour of the Talking Book Library. We got to see the recording studios that they use, and we got to meet some of the voices that we hear sometimes in some of the books. Those people that have awesome speaking voices. You meet them in person, and their voices are just like they are on the books. They are so professional in what they do. It just amazes me. And recently, the Florida Regional Group made a donation to the Talking Book Library. So they mentioned that one of the things that they are in short supply of is the cartridges that they record the books on and send out to the recipients of their services. And so the donation that the Florida Regional Group made was going to buy, I think, about 1,200 cartridges so that they could have additional media for the recordings to be copied to and sent out to people as they requested audiobooks.
Now, how are you and the Rehab Council working to bring in a new president, or not a new president, but a new director for the Talking Book Library?
Okay, at our last meeting, we did talk about that based on the job announcement that they had and the duties and responsibilities that they had. A lot of people felt that what they were asking that position to do for the pay that they wanted, we thought that there was a little bit of a discrepancy there. It was explained to us by Division of Blind Services that the bureau chiefs have a certain salary range within the state, but most bureau chiefs aren't asked to go out and raise money. And so we felt that that was an exception and that people shouldn't be worried about that, but that was one of the stumbling blocks. And so we are working in trying to change the position description so that they can attract more people.
Okay, Doug, I see that you're a Mason. How long have you been a Mason?
When the pandemic hit, everything shut down, and I had been invited to join a local Masons Lodge by some friends of mine that I do a lot of community work with. And so since everything was shut down and there wasn't much going on, I figured that I would be a good opportunity to join. So in 2020, in February, I was initiated into the local Masons Lodge. Because everything was so slow, I was able to do all the work that's required, all the memorization and everything to attain the Master Mason degree by December. And so from February, I was initiated, and then December, I made my Master Mason with all that secretive stuff that we're not supposed to talk about. But there's a lot of work, and none of it is written down. You have to memorize everything. So if for some reason somebody should find a book or something like that, it's never written down. And then after I made Master Mason, I was able to participate in the lodge. And the leader of the lodge that I was in wanted to do an airplane show at the airport. So he asked me and one other gentleman that came in about the same time I did if we would help him put on a motorcycle, car, and airplane show out at the airport. And of course, I said, that sounds like fun. So I said, sure, I'd do it. And so we did our first one last year. So the Masons organize it. They put it on. They raise the money to pay for everything that goes on in the event. So when the event actually happens, it's free to the public and there's free parking out at the airport. And we get airplanes that fly in. Some of them are antique airplanes. Some of them are just regular aviation airplanes. We had an Army CH-47 helicopter fly over from Camp Blanding for our event. And we had some Army National Guard with that. They could tell about the aircraft. So we got sponsorships to sponsor the event. We even had a surviving Tuskegee Airman, Lieutenant Colonel George Hardy, who lives in Sarasota. We had a doctor fly him up from Sarasota, and he was an honorary guest of our event. And that was really cool. We had a lot of kids from the community came out and met him, saw pictures of him in World War II when he used to fly missions there. And he was 96 last year. This year he'll be 97 years old, and he wants to come back and do it again. So the money that we raise from this event as Masons goes to a nonprofit here in town that's called the Tallahassee Veterans Outreach. And that group uses the money to put on their veterans stand down that they do every year to serve homeless and at-risk veterans in the Tallahassee area. And so that's since the whole thing is organized to support and to raise money to support veterans is one of the reasons that I was glad to do it. And so we did our first one last year, and we raised about $13,000. And this year we're planning on doing it again on October 22nd. And I'm hoping that we're able to get more airplanes, more cars, more motorcycles, and more visitors to the event. And I'm hoping that we get a lot bigger sponsorships than we had in the past so that we would be able to continue to put on a large event like this and have it be free to the public.
Is there anything else that you would like to talk about? Anything that we haven't covered?
Yeah, well, also as part of my community involvement, I'm also involved with a group that's called the Independent Order of Oddfellows. And here in Tallahassee, a lot of people that are Masons are also Oddfellows. It's just a different charitable fraternal organization that dates back to the 1600s, like the Masons does in England. And as a matter of fact, that's where I met the Oddfellows Lodge, a group of people that were also Masons. And they're the ones that invited me to join the Masonic Lodge. And so those are two groups that I belong to that are not blindness groups. And I fully participate in those groups, and I'm in leadership in both of those groups and will continue to be in leadership. I try not to let blindness stop me from doing anything. It might slow me down, but I'm adapting and I'm learning how to continue to do the things that mean something to me in the community while being blind.
Well, it sounds like you're doing a fantastic job. Well, Doug, thank you for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me.
You're welcome. And now we're going to turn it over to Ellie.
Thanks, Doug. So let's take a look in the Wisdom for the Blind inbox and see what the viewers have to say today. A listener from Texas asked, "We really love the radio station and podcasts. If we would like to keep the wisdom coming, how can we be a supporter? Thanks for your feedback. The best way for listeners to support us is to donate. If you would like to, there are two different ways. The first is to go to the Wisdom for the Blind website at w4bv.org from a browser, then hit the Donate Now button to get to a secure form to fill out. The second way is to mail a check to Wisdom for the Blind Attention Donations at 1005 Marina Mile Boulevard, Suite 255, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, 33315. All donations will help keep the wisdom coming. Thanks for your question. To our listeners, please remember that if you have any kind of feedback, you can always email them to feedback@w4tb.org. Should you need more information on any groups, please go to w4tb.org. Or you can also email us at info@w4tb.org. This is Ellie with Wisdom for the Blind Studios. Back to you, Doug, and keep up the good work.
This is Doug Cram coming to you from the Wisdom for the Blind Studios. Take care.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Share. Please look out for the next episode ping soon and visit us on the web at www.w4bv.org. This has been Share with your host, Mr. Douglas Cram. Produced by Wisdom for the Blind and VNS Productions, a division of VNS International.